We're going to stay on schedule. So, good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for joining us on today's Did You Know webinar. Our topic today is New York Demand Response Program. My name is Alyssa Lopez, and I'm here with Jeff Demansky, Pat Courtney Strong, and we are your local Mid-Hudson, NYSERDA regional outreach contractors. We have a really great agenda for you today, so I'm going to try to keep this brief and very much looking forward to your questions. So what I'm doing is I'm going to mute all of the attendees, and I'm also going to have the speakers muted until it's their opportunity to talk so that everyone can listen into the webinar and get as clear of a feed as possible. If you have questions that come up as the webinar is, going along, feel free to start asking them. There's a chat and a questions feature on your GoToWebinar control panel. And I welcome you to ask any questions. I'll be watching the questions and the chat along the way. So if you have a question that I myself can answer, I will answer it right away. And if it's a question that's for the presenters, at the end of the webinar, we will make sure to have those questions answered live. And if we go too far, then those will also be sent to you. All the answers will be sent to you along with the recording over email. Lastly, what I wanted to say is that, we're dependent on our Wi-Fi systems and our computers. So if there is a glitch, or maybe you're taken off offline, feel free to call me. Or send me a text message. I'm going to write my number in the chat session, but I'll also give it to you right now. My phone number is 914-329-7917. And if you have any technical problems, please text me and let me know. And I'm going to go put myself on mute and send you off with Jeff Demansky, the man who does not need any introductions.
That's great. Thank you so much, Melissa. And I won't waste any more time with the self-introduction. So we do have a great lineup of speakers today, and I do want to jump right in so that we give them as much time to cover this great topic. So in a nutshell, I'll just tell you that demand response, these are programs that encourage consumers to use less electricity at crucial times. And the encouragement comes in the form of cash payments. But there's assistance that goes with that. But for more detail and definition, I'm going to turn it over to our speakers shortly. For the time being, though, I just will tell you a little bit about Courtney Strong, Inc., who we are your hosts for this webinar, and what our relationship is to the topic, and just briefly. We are NYSERDA's Economic Development Program contractors for the Hudson Valley, from Westchester and Rockland counties to the south, up to Sullivan and Ulster and Dutchess counties to the north. And as the NYSERDA's Economic Development Growth Extension, or EDGE contractors, we provide support for all of NYSERDA's commercial and industrial programs with a focus on matching energy projects with funding. And NYSERDA has demand response programs, as you will hear from Jennifer Dowd in today's webinar. As energy is so crucial to business, we also support the region's broader economic development efforts, including by supporting the Mid-Hudson Regional Economic Development Council. We also offer support in the use of New York's standard program application tool, the CFA, or the Consolidated Funding Application. And all of this work is based on our management of partnerships. And we're very pleased to have great partners on our webinar today. To set the stage, though, here's the topics we're going to be covering in today's webinar. First, I will introduce our speakers, and then I'll hand it off to the speakers, where we'll get a little bit more of a definition of what demand response is and what it's about. That same speaker, Donna Pratt, will talk about NYSO's programs, the New York ISO. Then we'll have our speaker talk about the Con Edison demand management programs, followed by a discussion of what NYSERDA offers. Our last speaker will talk about curtailment service providers, or private companies that assist with demand response programs. And today we have David Chernis from Converge. I'm going to do a brief introduction now. Oops, our last topic will be questions and answers. I'm going to do a brief introduction to our speakers, our great speakers, but if you want, we will have the bios for all of our speakers available online as well, associated with our webinar recording. So first of all, I want to welcome Donna Pratt, who is with the New York ISO. She's been involved in the design, implementation, and evaluation of innovative pricing and demand response programs for over 20 years. At the New York ISO, Ms. Pratt is responsible for demand response program design, development, and analysis. Next, we have David Reevy, who is a senior specialist in the Energy Efficiency and Demand Management Department at Con Edison of New York. He's been working in the utility industry for 7 years and has experience in utility deregulation, energy efficiency, and demand response. And his recent responsibilities have been in the development of the current demand response programs that are offered by Con Ed in the New York and Westchester areas. From NYSERDA, we're very pleased to have Jennifer Dowd, who's an associate project manager within NYSERDA's Energy Efficiency Services Division. Her main focus is on commercial and industrial energy efficiency and demand reduction programs in the Con Edison territory through NYSERDA's Demand Management Program, which you'll hear more about. And finally, we're very glad to have David Chernis, who is formerly an energy advisor at the Central Hudson Commercial Lighting Program. David has a background in both renewable energy and energy efficiency auditing, and he's currently working to bring New York ISO demand response funding to Hudson Valley and Westchester commercial customers, offering Converge's engineering services and energy efficiency upgrades to the customers through those New York ISO demand response enrollment and revenue programs. So thank you all for being here with us today, and I'm going to hand it off to Donna Pratt now, who will talk about a little bit about what demand response is and then go into the New York ISO offering.
Thanks, Jeff. The first thing that we wanted to talk about, can you go to the next slide, please? Oh, I guess next one after that. Just to set the stage, we wanted to give a standard definition about what demand response is. And essentially, it's how end users change their electricity usage from what they normally would do, either in response to prices or in response to incentive payments when the system reliability is jeopardized. So for the New York ISO's demand response programs, the primary way that we use demand response has to do with the last part of that, the definition that you see here, when system reliability is jeopardized. So there is a payment associated with that, an incentive payment, and it's done only when the NYSO needs support. There are other types of demand response programs, so I'm going to switch right into talking about what demand response resources are expected to do. So if you can move forward to slide 9. So what do we expect of demand response resources? We ask them to reduce their power use during specific periods of time as directed by the New York ISO in the NYSO's demand response programs. That is either reductions to assist in maintaining system reliability, or when it's economic for that customer to shed load and get paid to do so based on a schedule. Loads can actually compete with generators to get paid for curtailing their load during certain periods of time. And who are our demand response resources, or what are they? They are any electricity consumer located in New York State that enrolls in specific demand response programs. Next, please. So the next thing we wanted to do is, how do you find out about these programs? How do you enroll in these programs? So as a retail consumer, you can be anything. We just put a few examples up here: industrial customers, hospitals, colleges, etc. We do have quite a variety of resources currently enrolled, or end-use consumers. They enroll through something called a New York ISO market participant. That includes entities like the transmission owner, your local distribution utility. If you use a competitive energy supplier, they may be able to enroll you in one of the NYSO's demand response programs, or you'll find third-party aggregators, such as Converge or curtailment service providers, that can enroll resources. The NYSO actually has a list of those demand response providers on its website, and at the end of the presentation, I will point out where you'll be able to find that. Next slide, please. So the NYSO has two different categories of demand response programs. The first is what we call reliability-based. And in this case, the New York ISO identifies when they need the resources, and we actually call you. When we say it controls activation, it is not a direct load control. It is basically that we tell you when you need to reduce. The second category of programs is our economic-based programs. And this is where you're offering your load reduction as a supply to the New York ISO, and you compete with our traditional generators. And if the cost for us to use you to produce that supply is less than a generator, then we would call on you and we would schedule you to do so. So you have a little more flexibility in participating in the economic demand response programs, but it does require a different size of resource to do so. Next slide, please. The area of focus that most of our demand response resources currently participate in is called the Special Case Resource Program. It is a reliability-based program. So in this case, a resource offers its capability in and gets a reservation payment or an availability payment based on whatever the current capacity market prices are. And in exchange for that, when the NYISO needs you, it will call on you to reduce energy during a specific period of time. There are two types of payment streams that come from this. One is a monthly capacity payment, and that is based on sales made through the ICAP auctions, and when there is an event or a test, then you'll also be eligible for an energy payment, which is based on the market price at the time of that event or test. That's what LBMP stands for, locational based marginal price. And there is a guarantee, so that if the price that is offered at the time or is available at the time, if the real-time price is lower than your minimum price, there'll be a guarantee that you'll get at least your minimum payment. Next slide. Now, some people wonder, what can I use to curtail my load, or how do I reduce my load for these types of events? And so you'll see in the first section that you can reduce your load, turn off lights, change the way that you use certain pieces of equipment, etc. And the minimum requirements are shown above. So the Emergency Demand Response Program and the Special Case Resource Program are both of our reliability programs, and you need 100 kW minimum, and that can be an aggregate if you're part of the Special Case Resource Program. So an aggregator or curtailment service provider can group you with a bunch of other resources to meet that 100 kW minimum. If you have behind-the-meter generators, we have some information about how you can use those to participate in the program. And if you want to participate in our economic programs, particularly our demand-side ancillary services program, not only do you need a minimum of 1 megawatt in aggregate, but you also have to have real-time telemetry and real-time metering with us. Next page. So to describe what a demand response event is, we talk about it again in the context of reliability programs, because this is where the majority of our resources are currently participating. It's the period of time when the resources are requested to reduce load based on a NYISO instruction. And we have had times where the events can be extended beyond the initial time, or they could even be terminated early. There's typically a 4-hour minimum duration of an event, but they can go longer, and the average is about 6 hours. Basically what happens is the New York ISO contacts the aggregator that you enrolled with, and then that aggregator gives you the instructions of the time during which you need to reduce. There is a day-ahead notice that is typically given, and then we give the aggregators about 2 hours advance notice, or a minimum of 2 hours advance notice before the event, before the resources are required to reduce. Next slide, please. This graphic is just to give you an example of how we identify what the load reduction is that we get during the event. So those 2 red vertical bars that you see there identify the period in which we've called on the demand response resource to reduce. And the purple shaded area that you see below the solid line represents the load that has actually been metered. The challenge is we have to actually estimate what you would have otherwise used so that we can identify what you are eligible for to recognize as the load reduction. And we use a baseline that can represent the historical usage over a period of time. One of our demand response programs, the Special Case Resource Program, actually has two baselines. That one is used for capacity and one is used for energy. What you're seeing here in this slide is the energy baseline over the course of the hours of the event. Next slide, please. So there is a lot of information about the NYSOS demand response programs on our website, and what I've done here is put the link into a more detailed presentation some of the slides of which in this presentation just highlight some of these aspects of the demand response programs. So the first link is for that training presentation. The second one is to the demand response web page. And the third one is how to get in touch with our stakeholder services if you have questions, because they can direct you to your more specific needs. Next slide, please. So if you venture onto our website, this is just an example of where you go to look. You click on Market Operations, which is the blue tab, and then you click on Demand Response, which will show up on it's in the first column on the right there. Next slide, please. When you get to our demand response page, you'll see a lot of information down below that solid blue line towards the lower third of the page. And in there, under general information, is where you'll find a list of those demand response providers that you can contact if you are interested in enrolling in our demand response programs. I've also added a couple of summary tables that'll show up in the next couple of slides. We'll just put them up maybe for a few seconds each. And these give you kind of a summary of different aspects, a comparison of our reliability program features, and then the next one is in our economic program features. Just to give you an idea of some of the highlights of the programs. There are a lot more information available through our website, and of course we have manuals for each of the demand response programs and where you can get all of the detailed rules. But as I said, our stakeholder services is a great place to start after you've looked at our website, and they can help you, direct you to more specific needs. That's it for me, Jeff.
I was talking to my muted button there for a second. Thank you so much, Donna. That was great information, great overview, and I do appreciate that you put all that information in there for the viewers right now and both for afterwards too. Just a reminder, these slides will be available at the Courtney Strong website. Now I'm going to turn it over to David Reevy with Con Ed. And David, I'm going to put up your first slide, and please, as Donna did, please advise me when to change slides.
Sure. Thanks, Jeff. So you might be wondering, why does Con Edison also have demand response programs in addition to the New York ISO having programs? Our programs are designed to meet needs at the distribution level, so the infrastructure that we maintain, whereas Donna's programs at the New York ISO are more for your transmission level needs. So the programs we run, they really help to provide a more reliable service. They can also reduce the need for us to activate peak generation on high demand days. If we have enough demand response, it can help us avoid costly infrastructure investments, which is something we're always looking for. Customers can receive incentives for participation in both Con Ed's demand response programs and the New York ISO programs, so that's a big benefit. People can also do things like manage their demand charges, and if a customer is looking at installing, say, like new generation, they may want to enroll that asset in a demand response program to help supplement the cost of installing that. Next slide, Jeff. So just an overview of the programs we have at Con Ed. We have two programs for our larger use customers. The first program is the Distribution Load Relief Program. We often refer to that as DLRP. Second program is the Commercial System Relief Program. And that program is only offered to customers in the New York City. So the rest of the presentation, I'll be speaking about the Distribution Load Relief Program. The program runs for 5 months, so it runs from May through September. To enroll in the program, we need to receive your enrollments by the deadline of April 1st for you to start on May 1st, or you can enroll by May 1st to start on June 1st. And the program has 2 ways you can participate. It has something we call the reservation payment option and the voluntary payment option. Next slide. So the reservation payment option, customers are paid what we call a reservation payment, which is basically we'll pay you for the KW that you enroll in the program, and you're going to get that payment regardless if we have an event or not each month. If we do have an event and you participate in that event, customers also receive what we call performance payments. That's for every actual KWH that you reduce. And in addition to that, the reservation option customers are eligible for a 3-year incentive payment. And what that is that's an incentive for you to commit your enrolled amount for a 3-year term, and for you to perform at a minimum level over that commitment. And if you meet those criteria, we'll give you an additional incentive at the end of the 3-year term. And we also have the voluntary option, which is only for KWH during an event. So that would be only if you're called would you be paid. Next slide. So the payment amounts for the distribution load relief program, the reservation option payment, we have a $6 per KW for something we call Tier 1 networks, $15 for something we call Tier 2 networks, and then the performance payment is the $1 per KWH for reduction during events. The majority of our networks are Tier 1 networks. There's only 10 Tier 2 networks out of about 83. So if you do enroll, the odds are that you'd be looking at the $6 per KW incentive for the reservation payment. Voluntary customers, when they are called to reduce and do reduce during an event, will receive $3 per KWH for those events. And if you meet the minimum participation criteria for the 3-year incentive as a reservation option customer, at the end of those 3 years, we'll go back and look at your performance and then pay you an additional $5 per KW for each month over that 3-year period. Next slide. So if you do decide to enroll in the distribution load relief program, just to let you guys know that we on average have 0 to 1 event per year. It's called on what we call a network level, which just means your geographic location, so it's not system-wide. We do require everyone participate in a test event. So we have 1 test event per year. That test event is only for an hour. Actual events can occur anywhere between 6 a.m. and midnight any day of the week. So when you do enroll, you do need to be mindful that you may have to provide that reduction during your non-peak hours. Events last for a minimum of 4 hours, and that's all we require customers to respond for. There could be situations where we ask for an extended reduction. Customers they can provide that on a voluntary basis and receive additional bonus payments, but we only require that they provide us with the 4 hours. And we give at least 2-hour notification before an event were to happen. It can be a little bit more than that, but generally it's around 2 hours. Next slide. So to enroll in the program, all customers just need to have an interval meter for participation. If you are over 500 kW demand, odds are that you're on a utility rate where we would provide you with that interval meter as a part of your billing rate. So most customers do have that. If they don't, they can buy a meter, and I'll go into that. But the other requirement that we have is that if you were enrolled directly with Con Ed, you need to be able to reduce 50 kW when called. Most of the customers that we have go through an aggregator, and it's not to say that if you can reduce 50 kW, you should enroll with Con Ed. In fact, most of the customers that are enrolled with an aggregator enroll more than 50 kW, and I guess the reason for that could be a lot of the benefits that come along with enrolling through an aggregator, and I have some of them here, which is they can provide energy audits, sub-metering, energy management platforms, and aggregators, as Donna mentioned, can enroll you in the New York ISO. So you may want to seek an aggregator that can, help you participate in both programs. They'll also do things like let you know how much you should be enrolling, so they'll let you know what your capabilities are. They'll provide notification services, and aggregator offers can vary from aggregator to aggregator. So you want to make sure you just have the fit that's right for you. Next slide. So for more information, anyone can go to our website. It's pretty simple. It's coned.com/dr, or you can email us at dr@coned.com. And on there we have anything from those Tier 2 networks that I mentioned. We have information on the other program that I spoke about earlier, the Commercial System Relief Program. We have our aggregator listing. If you aren't sure if you have an interval meter and you need to upgrade, we have the application for upgrading, and we also have some information on where you can possibly get some incentives for that meter upgrade. And we have more in-depth information like on how events are settled, which can be a little more complicated, but if anyone has any questions, please feel free to contact us, like I said, at our email address at dr@coned.com. And I think that's it for me.
That's great, David. Thank you so much for that. That's a very good overview. Now, for the NYSERDA perspective, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Dowd. Jennifer, we're going to unmute you, and please walk us through. I'm going to put up your first slide.
Okay, great. So from NYSERDA, there are two main programs where we offer demand response incentives. The first is the Existing Facilities Program, and this is throughout New York State. You must pay the Systems Benefits Charge, and we have two options, the performance-based incentive and a pre-qualified incentive for interval meters, which I'll go into a little bit later. And then the new Demand Management Program, this is existing commercial facilities within Con Edison territory, and you must pay the monthly adjustment clause. Next slide. So under the Existing Facilities Program for the performance-based incentive, we provide incentives to enable demand response measures that include load shedding controls, automation equipment, and new generation equipment. We cover 75% of the project cost. There are bonus incentives for fleet integrated demand response and room air conditioning units, and then load shedding ballasts. These can be multiple projects across multiple facilities bundled into one application, and the minimum incentive is $30,000. The incentive rate for this one is $100 per kW. And next slide. So to make sure that you pay the system benefits charge, you'll see on your utility bill, it's usually listed, and then it's only for upstate certain utilities, and then downstate it's only Con Ed. If you go to the next slide. For the pre-qualified incentive, you can receive up to $1,500 per meter for interval meters. They must be accurate to within plus or minus 2%. They must enable at least 40 kilowatts of demand response, and you must register with either NYSO or another utility demand response program. And you can receive up to $30,000 in pre-qual incentives per calendar year. Next slide. So for the new demand management program, again, this is only within Con Edison territory. Our goal is to reduce 125 megawatts through either demand response or combined heat and power. And for demand response measures or demand side measures, we have $219 million set aside. And if you go to the next slide. This is a joint Con Edison-NYSERDA program. We have several outreach contractors that are helping bring in applications. Lockheed Martin for Con Edison and Lutine Associates and Willdan for NYSERDA. And this is really building on existing incentives that we both offered, and now it's just one program. And if you go to the next slide. So for the demand management program, no equipment may be removed or installed until we do a pre-install inspection. Only Con Edison customers, 100% NYPA customers are not eligible. You must pay the monthly adjustment clause, and we are looking for projects that you must achieve 50 kW or greater. They must be installed and operational by June 1st, 2016, and for everything that's not demand response, it's capped at 50%. Next slide. So projects, again, can be aggregated into, to reach that 50 kW. They can either be one building owner aggregating multiple buildings, or they can be a third party applicant with multiple building owners. In that case, each building must meet the 10 kW threshold. Next slide. And for you have to prove that you are reducing electricity during the peak demand window, and that's 2 to 6, Monday through Friday, June 1st through September 30th. Next slide. And here's an example of what our past incentives were for downstate. And with the new DMP incentive, you can now receive $800 per kW for demand response enablement. We also offer bonus incentives for projects that reach 500 kW or 1 megawatt. Next slide. And for the demand management program, we do require that you sign up or are already signed up with the New York Independent System Operator Installed Capacity Special Case Resources Program, or ICAP SCR. You can also sign up for the other programs, but you must be enrolled in the ICAP SCR program for demand management program incentives. Next slide. And again, this is to offset the cost of new demand response equipment or software. Must be registered in the SCR program. And if you're already registered, you have to provide additional KW to get an incentive on the additional KW. We are not incentivizing KW that is already signed up through the ICAP SCR program. And again, we are verifying the KW saved by either a planned test event by the NYSERDA NYSERDA and Con Ed technical reviewers, or an actual NYSO event, or a NYSO test event. And the incentive will be based on the actual kilowatts saved achieved during that test event. Next slide. We're also providing incentives for new generators for demand response events or emergency purposes. These generators must meet all federal and New York State emission and permitting requirements. A few of those are the EPA Tier 4 final new source performance standards, and then also testing and permitting from the New York Department of Environmental Conservation. In addition to the NYSO SCR program, you can also enroll in the the two Con Edison programs that were mentioned before. Next slide. And this is just an example of previous incentives, an example of a project for demand response and how much it got pre-DMP. And then now with the DMP incentives, the incentive is greater and the payback is lower. And next slide. And that's it for me.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Just to clarify, So NYSERDA, would you say it's correct to say that NYSERDA facilitates the use of the Con Ed and the New York ISO programs? That's the aim of the NYSERDA programs, is to facilitate those programs, not so much your own programs that parallel those, that overlap.
So we don't have demand response programs. You have to sign up with either the NYSO or a utility demand response programs, and we are just incentivizing people to sign up in those programs.
All right, that's great. Thank you for that clarification.
Yep.
Well, Jennifer, thank you. I'm going to turn it over now to David Chernis, who's with Converge, and there has been a lot of reference to aggregators and to the service providers, and so this is great that we have David with us to give an example of what one of those companies do, and he's also I want to credit him with really initiating the idea for this webinar, because he came to us with the exciting news about the changes to these programs and how they're being incented to bring in more customers and what's there for those customers. So David, let me turn it over to you, and I'll go right to your next slide.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, we're really excited about the developments here in Hudson Valley and Westchester. A little bit about Converge. We work directly with utilities and directly with commercial and industrial customers at a national and international level. My particular office is right here in Hudson Valley, and our main New York office is down in Manhattan. Next slide, please. So demand response revenue can essentially create an internal fund for a facility to do energy efficiency upgrades, look at new technology, automation, building optimization. All of these things in turn give you more curtailment capability, and would also increase your demand response enrollment level. So all of these things are interrelated. Next slide, please. This is what we're really excited about here in Hudson Valley, Westchester. Last year, rates paid to customers were $50,000 per megawatt of curtailment capability. This year, we're looking at $100,000 per megawatt of curtailment capability paid annually. And that's in line with Manhattan almost. That's Manhattan is at $130,000 per year, and you can see that the rest of the state is, as of May, was $50,000 per year, and Long Island is similar at $60K. So that's huge. Next slide, please. That coupled with this fantastic new rebate that Jennifer and David have been talking about, it's just a slam dunk for controls, automation, and we can actually address some smaller customers and aggregate them together through this automation is the application that we're using. Hudson Valley also very respectable, $100 per kW for demand response enablement, and for us that's we're looking at that as controls and automation. Next slide, please. So curtailment service providers, this is a rundown of what a typical CSP would offer. We go through a facility and top to bottom audit, looking at HVAC, large motors, cooling loads, and from there we would create a customized curtailment strategy, and while in there looking for energy efficiency strategies to try to improve efficiency at the facility. And of course NYSO pays you monthly for participation, and that would go through your CSP account management team. Next slide, please. When shopping for a CSP, I would recommend that everyone pays in a different way. Ideally, you would want to go with a CSP that can give you actual clearing prices versus a kind of a deflated, locked-in rate. So you want to do your research there and know what you're getting. Payment frequency varies from CSP to CSP. We tend to pay monthly. At both the NYSO and Con Ed do issue those payments monthly. So some CSPs tend to pay quarterly. So if that's important to you, that's a consideration also. Next slide, please. So in addition to designing a curtailment strategy for you, and we would maybe give you 10 manual curtailment measures, and you can pick and choose the 5 best that best fit your facility, and at the same time looking for energy efficiency opportunities that demand response revenue can fund. We will also help you with the NYSERDA rebate side, taking care of the application administration of that. And NYSERDA rebates, NYSERDA Con Ed rebates apply to everything from the interval meter if you're not already interval metered at that 500 kW scale. We'll put one in for you and handle the rebating for you there. And then finally, measurement and verification, and also helping you manage your kW load and looking for maybe some issues that are creating bad spikes and helping you go and eradicate those. Next slide, please. This is an example of Network Operations Center. So from here, your CSP will monitor your kW load and also initiate curtailment strategies with day-ahead notice from the New York ISO. And as I was mentioning before, we can help you monitor your facility, and this is how we also verify both the tests and your performance during an event. Next slide, please. This is an example of an interval meter. We would install this for you and apply for the NYSERDA rebates, which are pretty generous with this stuff. This gives us a 15-minute interval snapshot of your kW demand. Next slide, please. Benefits to a facility or a CSP customer, we can not only give you access to this in the form of a real-time dashboard, help you monitor and keep an eye on your own kW demand, but we would help you to look for these peaks. Now, if all of your equipment's coming on at one time, in this case, you're creating a pretty sizable peak there a couple of days out of this month, you're paying your utility to keep that much power for you at the top of the pole all month long. So by staggering machine startup, maybe installing variable frequency drives, we can eradicate those peaks very simply, and it helps them know that they're happening. So that's another thing we look for our customers. Next slide, please. Enrollment and requirements, pretty simple, just a letter of authorization so that your local utility can give us data access to your KW metering. W9, contact information throughout your enterprise so that we can contact you with day-ahead notice and notify you of the New York ISO event with plenty of advance time. Next slide, please. So after we design a curtailment strategy for you, and we like to do that so that everybody feels confident that you'll be able to not only perform but overperform. If for some reason something happens and you don't perform well on a test or especially an event, and that would be a 4 to 6 minimum consecutive hours, what happens is your payments will go down, and we'll enroll you at a slightly less amount. And if you overperform, your payments go up, and you get enrolled at a higher amount for the next time. Next slide, please. Here are some sample revenues from some different sectors. First example is a factory. Not every factory is able to shut down for 4 hours in an afternoon, but for this particular customer of ours, that revenue is so significant for them that they decided to do that, and that in essence does create that internal revenue stream to do some other energy efficiency improvements, and it's pretty substantial. Same with this hospital example, just by running their generators with the right DEC, DEP permitting, that's a pretty substantial revenue stream. And again, we can apply that to go through and do some other upgrades if applicable. Thanks to automation, and I'll speak to this a little bit in the coming slides, we're able to look at smaller customers also. We're able to aggregate them, and with automation, make that a little simpler for them to participate. Next slide, please. Energy efficiency measures, I won't go through all of this, but pretty much top to bottom, looking at HVAC, lighting, automation, and of course, generators. With the proper permitting, we can actually help with that. Some CSPs are actually able to handle the environmental permitting portion of that, which can get a little complicated, so it's a nice service to be able to offer. Next slide, please. This is where we're going. This is the future of demand response, we feel anyway. This takes all of the manual effort out of the equation. If a plant manager has to run around and initiate some curtailment strategies, maybe manually, that takes manpower and time. Completely doable, but with automation through a building management system, great new technologies with for wireless intelligent thermostats and demand cycling equipment, we can actually automate the entire curtailment strategy with a one-button activation, and that's with day-ahead notice. And this is where we're really headed. This makes it very simple to participate. Next slide, please. And again, the NYSERDA Con Ed incentives really speak to this. Very generous, large incentives right now from these guys. So they're here today. I wouldn't wait too long if this is something that you feel would be a benefit to your facility. It's almost the incentives are so high right now. It's really pretty much a no-brainer. So your local CSP will be able to give you some estimates and a basic engineered kind of approach and help you navigate through the process. Next slide, please. So to summarize, the New York ISO offers great revenue for your facility in exchange for your capability and willingness to be on standby to help in an event. Help keeps the grid healthy and efficient and cost effective, and in conjunction with the NYSERDA and Con Ed rebates, you've got a very powerful solution to fund energy efficiency measures for your facility and get paid at the same time to do so. Next slide, please. And that's my presentation. Thanks, everyone.
David, thank you so much. And just to remind everyone, these slides are going to be available and posted to our website, and you can download them as well in a PDF format. So you'll have the contact for pretty much everyone that's spoken today, including that last slide. But I'm going to leave this slide up for you can contact us too to be directed to any of our speakers or to ask us any questions. And let me also remind everyone, there have been some questions that have come in, we've noticed. But if you have, there are also hands raised. But I want to make sure all those folks who have raised their hands via the webinar do type their questions into the question box. So please do that. But now let me just turn back, and I guess a little bit in reverse order. David, let me just clarify. So these are substantial payments. I'm really glad you gave some examples about how much a customer might get from the program, and you gave a little bit of a range. But we're talking tens of thousands of dollars for some of the larger customers, but even for some of the smaller ones, you know, upwards of a $10,000 annual payment. Is that correct?
Correct, and if you look to the rate changes, for example, on that map earlier in the slides, specifically is on GHI. If you can kind of do the math there, if that's $100,000 per megawatt, you can break that into 100 kW pieces, which are the smallest unit, except for, you know, unless you're aggregated. So that's $10,000 per 100 kW of curtailment capability.
That's great, David. Thank you. So let me also springboard off something that you mentioned, that it's a good time to take advantage of this program, that the rates have increased. But let me ask maybe a question for Donna Pratt and David at Con Ed, folks who've been involved on the design side and maybe projecting forward a little bit. But can you tell us about the future of these programs? I mean, is there an understanding about not so much, I guess there's two ways to think about the future. One is what the influence of technology, which David from Convert spoke to, and others. But the programs themselves, I mean, will technology, will these programs be here for years to come? Can you give us any sense of this? Melissa, if you could unmute those folks.
Can you hear me, Jeff?
Yeah, we can, yes.
I definitely think these programs are going to be around for years to come, and they're definitely going to continue to grow as far as, you know, as ways and methods for people to participate come about as technology grows. And it's something that you know, the utility industry is keeping a close eye on, as you know, to include this as an asset on the way we do business.
Donna, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, Jeff, what I'd like to point out is that for the New York ISO programs, they are market-based payments. So it depends on the way that the capacity auctions come out that the payments are determined. And as David pointed out a little earlier, the payments are right now are slightly different than they have been in the past. But there's no guarantee of what the payment is going to be on a month-to-month basis because it is an auction-based process that determines the payments. In terms of the future of the programs, we are looking to try and figure out how to keep demand response resources participating in our markets. There are some current there's some uncertainty at the moment of whether or not the demand response will continue to be allowed to come directly to an aggregator or whether it will have to go through a retail type of an arrangement because of some recent rulings in the federal courts. But we have had these programs in place for about 14 years, and until our regulator determines that we are no longer eligible to have them, in the demand response in the wholesale market, we'll continue to support these programs.
Well, thank you, Donna. So a little clarification, too, with projection on technology here. Now, there's talk of the smart grid and smart meters. Will these make the programs easier to use in the future? Will these demand response and program payments still be available or easier to use with the deployment of new technologies?
I think it'll make them easier for the customers to be able to respond. I think as David Chernis had said in his presentation, automation is really the key to make it easier for people to make these kinds of changes in their electricity behavior. When it becomes automatic, it's a lot easier because you don't have to worry about it.
But David, let me carry over to you now. You did speak about the automation, automated demand response. Does the customer lose manual control of their facility when these new technologies are deployed?
There's different ways to do it, but as we're working with a lot of, for instance, critical care facilities, things like that, on our side, the customer does not lose manual control. What we're automating is the curtailment strategy so that they have one-button functionality with that day-ahead notification. There are models that fully automate the curtailment strategy, but at our level, most of our customers do feel more comfortable if they have manual override if there was a reason that they needed to.
Very good. Thank you, David. I guess a question for everyone, but maybe David from Con Ed could answer this. But so just to clarify, and I think it was stated within, but is a customer able to participate in multiple demand response programs?
Definitely. You know, as I said, customers that are eligible to enroll in the CSRP program, which is available for New York City, they can enroll in that program. They can enroll in our DLRP program, and they can enroll in the New York ISO program. So they can bundle those program options together to really increase the incentives that are available.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for that clarification. I'm sure that'll be helpful to the folks listening. Melissa Lopez, let me turn it over to you. I don't want to dominate this conversation. I know we have some questions that have come in. Can you share with us some of the questions that we've received from the question box?
Yes. So one of the questions that came in when David Chernis was speaking, but I'm sure that anyone can answer it. What do you find to be the major demand reduction measures?
Right. So there's a lot of things you can do manually for a large facility. For instance, you can pre-cool your building a couple of degrees, let's say down to 66, 67 degrees in the morning when the building is already slightly cool. And we're talking about the summertime here. And then you can increase your temperature set point, say from a 72 to a 74 through the afternoon, and that will essentially give you some demand cycling of your compressors and also reduce your kW demand. We'd be able to determine the curtailment amount with a test. Other options would be to run your backup generator. Backup generators, if they're properly permitted, can be immediately enrolled in demand response. It's just a matter of running your generator, and that's a nice way to monetize something which normally, well, for a new generator, wouldn't have a payback or an ROI, or help to cover some of the maintenance costs with the generator. Those are just a couple of measures that you can do manually.
Very good, thanks. Melissa, any other questions?
Well, not necessarily a question, but I did want to clarify that for the NYSERDA and the Con Edison demand management program, projects must be installed by June 1st, 2016. We did get some questions coming in from that, so that's the stated date on that one.
Very good. Thank you so much. So, any other questions from the audience?
No, everybody wants to know if these slides are going to be available, and they will. The recording will be available as well. And that's all I've got on my end.
All right, great. Any other comments from our speakers before we do our sign-off? I'll take that as a no. And also, at this point, I will say to everyone, this doesn't end. If you do have some suggestions for our future events or questions on this webinar, please do contact us at some of the contact information shown. Please do share your ideas for future events. We do have 2 webinars in the works right now, one focused on biomass programs in New York and another focused on combined heat and power, or CHP. So we've got some good technical information to share with you guys in the upcoming days, so stay tuned for that. But with that, let me thank all of our speakers again. Donna, our 2 Davids, David from Con Ed and David from Converge, and Jennifer from NYSERDA. Thank you very much for all of your cooperation and participation in sharing all of this great information. And with that, I will say goodbye and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.